Thanks to Dr. Nirmal Krishnani and Dr. Srinal Samant for hosting us here. We're glad to be here. We are a generation of architects that was educated in the 20th century. And we were conscious that our education was influenced by Western ideologies by virtue of the curriculum. However, we were simultaneously drawn to regional narratives of design of our built environment. We also found ourselves migrating from the analog to the digital medium as a crossover generation. Our trajectory emerged from responses to projects with first principles approach. Our investigations into specificities of land, water, vegetation, and climate gave us clues to interpret what we call the context. Over time, technology has strengthened this approach to a more informed design response. By our engagement with people we built for, we could establish a strong relationship with people and their communities. So this is the background on which we built our practice. So this is one very important thread in our practice. We look at social sustainability by fostering the non-program relationship or interactive relationships. So what we realized very early was that, programs scripted how we interacted with people. The social interactions and community was actually defined by program itself. That generally came from the client. But you also had non-programmatic spaces, which we look at supporting spaces like corridors, like overlooking spaces, like balconies. These are all additional spaces that get added on into the program to make it a wholesome program. So these spaces we realized you could negotiate, and these could become places for choice or chance interactions. So if you could curate these in the right manner, you could have this opportunity of create social spaces all across the entire architectural project. The next aspect is the performance of building. So we look at it as a design challenge, actually. So conceptually, when we start itself, we start looking at form making. We look at the orientation of the building, the volumes, the height of spaces, the structural system, the skin, the facade itself, whether it needs to breathe, whether it needs to be in layers, whether it needs to be a solid surface or create a thermal mass. All these are actually design decisions that we take very early in the project so that your building can perform better. So it's not something that we look as a complete technological solution, but we do bring in technology towards the later part, and we bring it in so that it becomes a comprehensive way of looking at the environment itself. So the first, okay, so these are, we're going to discuss the Indian climate zones next. So we've built across India, and today we'll be discussing projects in the 4 climatic zones of India. So in the north, you can see a project, it's in Mist Kasauli, it's in the hills, in the Himalayas. So it's a cold climate there. And in the center of India, it's MGHB, it's a university housing we built. So it's hot, dry climate there. And the southern part of India, Kochi Biennale, we built something in the warm, humid areas. And Mumbai also is warm and humid. And so is the western part of India where we built, it's warm and humid. So these 4 different climatic zones that we are dealing with in today's. So the kind of programs you're going to deal with is a single family weekend home, a multi-family, multiple family weekend houses, student housing project, a student housing project in a different climatic zone, a school of architecture and planning, and also a primary school and a secondary school. That's an adaptive reuse project. An advertising agency, also an adaptive reuse project, a restaurant, a bar, and finally an installation in the Kochi Muziris Biennale. So that's more like an urban project, an insert, which is more like a transient space. So the first project is a weekend home for a client in Mumbai. So this is a place close to Alibag. Alibag is a place for weekend homes. It's across on the mainland from Mumbai. People take a boat. So it's an hour on the boat, and then you can come to this place. It's a place called Kashid. And this house is near a village called Survey. So you can see the landscape. On the left-hand side, you have the Arabian Sea. Then you have the house marked on the Google map there is alongside the paddy fields. So this is the context we are dealing with. So you have high amount of rainfall here, and it does get hot too. And the rains come with a lot of wind here. So southwesterly monsoons coming with a lot of wind here. So the second part, you see a bungalow below here. This is it's called the Bura bungalows, and the client came from Assam, and she came from a family of tea planters, and she wanted a house of the Bura bungalow on this site. And she wanted this house as a weekend house where she could write. She's a writer. So that was the context we're coming with the client and what she wanted and the aspiration here. Next, please. And so this is the site actually narrowed in. You can see on the left-hand side is the plan where you see a flatter piece of land, but sloping down towards the paddy fields on the right-hand side. But we also had on the site, we could see that there was enough rain going through the site and water going into the paddy field. So there was soil erosion constantly, and we could see the roots. There were 5 mango trees on this site, which is very important. This is all man planted. And the well that you see is also man-made. We could see the well was collapsing. It was, the soil was covering. So the first idea that we came up with is this idea of protecting these mango trees. And that was very important for us. So once we protected the mango trees and safeguarded the well, the next idea was to then come up with what the client wanted, which was a Bura house. Actually, a Bura house is a veranda on the periphery with the private spaces in the center. It's a simple typology of house that overlooks the tea plantation. But in this case, we were going to overlook the paddy fields. So what we realized is when we put the Bura house there, we realized that we actually couldn't see the paddy fields because the canopies of the trees were actually obstructing that view. So what we said is, why don't we actually open up this veranda and place it parallel to the contours, very close to the mango trees. And what we did with the private spaces is we actually nestled them at the lower level perpendicularly to this veranda. So the idea of the public spaces, the veranda on the higher level and the private spaces below. So this is kind of a redefining, reconfiguring the typology of the Bura bungalow. So these are the plans that you see. Once we started actually working on the plans, we had to sort of facilitate how these lower spaces would actually fit into the between the roots and the upper spaces between the canopies of the mango trees. That's why it's called the shadow house. So we're working with within the canopies and the roots at 2 levels here. And you can see that retaining wall actually which wraps around these mango trees. So we did both together. We protected the mango trees, we stopped the soil erosion, and we were using the shadow of the mango trees. And actually you can pluck mangoes from here. You have a fantastic sort of supply of mangoes coming down here. So you can see these retaining walls at the lower level wrapping around the mango tree there. This is more the engineered part of it. That was the conceptual part of it. And this is what the veranda actually looks like. So this veranda has been fragmented into 2 parts. The side on the left hand side is the dining area of the kitchen, and the right hand side is the living spaces of the house. So you come into the center, and that's the veranda actually. So it has deep sort of slabs coming out over balconies that, I mean, slabs that project out, and the water is collected in these ponds here, which is then recirculated. It's sent to the well that we sort of have here. You can also see that actually we allow for the winds to move through this space. So over the water, and these 3 slits that you see in this veranda, they're actually not glazing. They're just thin mosquito mesh. So this is constantly breathing. This veranda is constantly breathing. So in a hot, humid climate, you don't want air to get trapped and you get muggy inside. So that's why this veranda space always keeps breathing, and with these mosquito meshes. So actually, we've actually worked with the local people for the landscape here. That's the veranda space. And this is the veranda actually looking on the northern side where the mango trees and the paddy fields are. So these verandas actually go over terraces of which are the private spaces below. They form terraces. So it's completely transparent in that sense. So this is on the other side. When you come on the side of the mango trees and the paddy fields, you can see the veranda above and the private spaces below. So the retaining wall actually starts wrapping around. And the idea we came up with is that the circulation of the house should be by engaging with the outside. Rather than actually having an internal circulation, we said that you should engage with the landscape and move out. So the whole stair and the connection from the private spaces to the veranda is actually from a stair that is outside. And that's the retaining wall. So that's what the client also liked, as it does both functions. And Manisha will take over on the next project.
So the next work we are sharing here is a multiple family weekend homes which were developed in the hills of Kasauli, which is in northern India. And here what we've done is we've used a biophilic approach where the infrastructure has been kept invisible. So this has a very cold and dry climate, and it also has varying steep terrains which overlook beautiful valleys all around. So the kind of density that we had was around mid density for this plot. So 18 different typologies with varying conditions of outdoor spaces have allowed for diverse engagement with the landscapes around. And the parameters which create these variations are the size of the house itself, which ranges from a studio to a 5-bedroom house, the topography that it sits on, the access to the house, and the surrounding views. So what you see over here is the size, like I said, varies from a studio to a 5-bedroom. The topography changes based on where the house is located, and different strategies have been adopted for situating or for sitting on those on the land. The access from the road, like you can see in some of these examples, one is entering from the lower levels, whereas over here it's from the mid level and sometimes from the uppermost levels. So these strategies also allow for variation based on the road, where the road is situated. The homes also have balconies, decks, and terraces within their homes, overlooking and experiencing the views and the surrounding landscapes. So here you're entering from the topmost level. Whereas again, here you enter from the lowest level and the views are to the same, or on the same side. And these are the studio apartments. So I'll be sharing 4 different units over here. There is the 2-bedroom and the 3-bedroom hybrid unit. This combination actually consists of 2 2-bedroom duplex units and 1 3-bedroom duplex unit, which is placed over that. The common spaces have been placed below the main bedroom spaces to the rear side, opposite the road entrance. And the balconies allow for the spaces to flow towards the outside, enabling human engagement with nature. The 3-bedroom villa is an independent one where again it has its access from the hillside, and the unit is accessed at the mid-level in section where the common spaces are situated, and the guest bedroom and the entertainment spaces are situated on the lower floors, whereas the master bedroom and the children's room overlook the valley from the upper floors. You have, this is the 4C, the staggered stack units. In this typology, the 4-bedroom units are staggered in section to adapt to the hill terrain. 2 units are mirrored and placed in the lower section of the hill access unit, and 2 have been mirrored, placed above these units by pulling them towards the hillside to meet with the road. And the 5-bedroom villa is a valley access unit where its lower level forms an entry foyer with a covered car park. The mid level has the common spaces, and there is a large double height space in the living and dining space, and the levels above and 2 have bedrooms each. The topmost level has the entertainment space with the pool deck over on the uppermost levels. So these are different photographs of the site itself. So each unit has been independent, but it comes together as a contiguous built form. The streetscapes which one observes allow for both variation and repetition. In terms of the material choice, the lower part is a stone cladded base, which is from local stone, and the midsection is a plastered surface, and the top section is with the wooden planks. And these villas houses cascade over the steep hillscape to capture the views of both the sky and the valley. And the retaining landscapes also have been merged with the buildings. Landscapes have been designed with built forms. So this project also has, there were reflections between the buildings. This was a clubhouse. So what you observe, I forgot to mention it earlier, the master planning for this was done by Kenyang. and we were appointed as architects for this project subsequently. So what happens here is these are all on different levels. So the upper level and the road and the lower road level have a difference of around 35 meters. So the rather than having a singular clubhouse on one particular level, which would not allow access to all the units all around, what we suggested was that it should be a fragmented clubhouse, which has some programs on the lower levels and some in the mid levels and some on the upper levels, but they are interconnected with each other. So here you observe the kind of steep terrain and how the terrain was modulated to create those connections. So this is a short film which was made by the promoter. The valleys around are breathtakingly beautiful, and they are almost 360 degrees around the site. So even the engagement from the inside allows for those conditions of overlooking these spaces. The next project I'll be sharing here is the Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya. This is an institute for the Hindi language, literature, translation and interpretation and culture. This was one of the very early projects of our practice where we did an open competition, and we were fortunate to get this project. This was around 212 acres in the geographical center of India in a place called Wardha, where the climate was extremely hot and dry. And this had a gentle terrain which overlooked the town, which was actually almost touching the site. So the kind of typology we used here was a low rise, low density. Due to the extreme climate, we adopted various strategies of increasing thermal mass and using a load bearing structure with minimum openings. And another strategy was to also vent the hot air when at the upper levels. So the built form has been fragmented in nature and consists of basic units of different scales that take on an informal character. So one of the things in the brief, in the competition brief, which had been given to us was they wanted hostels for different departments and for different years. So our sort of approach was to actually merge the, allow for forming communities by actually merging these different fragments of spaces which were combined together. So the organization and the orientation of these units is primarily determined by the undulating nature of the site. And this makes the relationship of each unit to a neighboring unit unique and specific. The sloping site gives rise to various interconnecting levels where the terraces of some units start overlooking the courtyard spaces of the others. So there are three different types of units which exist. There is a single room, there is a twin room, and a married scholars room, which function individually as a personal space and are physically disconnected from neighboring units, but programmatically connected by a common area, which is shared by 10 to 12 students. The common area includes the kitchen, the small dining area, and a living games area. The common area and a toilet block with scattered units forms a basic cluster. So this is the site with its contours, which have been minimally cut and filled to allow for terracing. And the circulation corridors are placed on these. And the program spaces then are interconnected through these corridors and terraces. The terraces, courtyards connect, extend, and animate movement with interaction. The units are a constant, but the relationship between the units, is the variable. This allows for a high level of flexibility in the design. In the residential zone, interaction between the students is facilitated by shared, open, non-programmatic spaces. So this is through the section, through the topography. Again, this is variable. So this is one of the sections, but as we move across different housing clusters, you have varied sections and responses to the contours. These are some of the photographs of the common corridors through which one moves. This is the common room, which you can access both at the upper levels and the lower levels. This is an international hostel which was built a little later. So this whole project actually was for 3,000 students. So it's built in different phases. So this was one of the later phases, which was the international hostel, again with similar ideas of fragmentation, undulating site, and the hostels adapting to the contours, and the possibility of creating these in-between spaces which become the social interaction between interactive spaces for the students. This is the non-teaching staff housing. Now this was again another cluster for the non-teaching staff. So one of the observations which the brief had in this case was that the units were extremely small. So what we wanted to provide for them was each unit was extended by a stilt area or a terrace which was provided to them to increase the house periphery. And these start then creating an interlocked space with a courtyard in the middle. And then these courtyards are actually then further connected with still spaces of another T unit and the terrace at the level above of the adjacent interlocking unit. This is the faculty housing. Now here we were also told one was the student housing, and then we also had the staff housing, which had the lecturers, professors, and the vice chancellor. So the faculty amongst the lecturers housing operated as a parallel wall house, as a load bearing structure, and the central section of the house forms the void that interconnects the house both vertically and horizontally at different levels of the house. So multiple units have been grouped together to create a connected landscape of varying scales of interactive open spaces. The faculty houses, the professors and the registrar house is an independent structure which is planned around a central void. Whereas the vice chancellor's house is strategically located on the university site to capture the most spectacular views of the site and its surroundings. So it's on the higher levels of the site. And the house negotiates these steep slopes by splitting the private spaces from the living spaces. And the living space is extended into a terrace which is semi-covered by a parasol roof to frame the views of the surroundings and to reduce the solar radiation on the terrace, making it an evening space. The health center is also envisioned as a single linear unit which is connected to the road by a ramp. So the way you overlook the hill on the higher levels and the town from the other side. Yeah, so the next project we'll be sharing is the student hostel project at the School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. This has the student housing which we designed here was for 750 students in Vijayawada, which is in Andhra Pradesh, which has an extremely hot and humid climate due to its proximity to the Krishna River basin. This was a flat terrain, unlike some of the others which we've shared today. It was within a campus and it was within the city of Vijayawada. As you can see, the context around, it's a fairly dense town which is growing very fast. And on the peripheries of the town, you have these Gunadala hills which you overlook. So the strategy for organizing the campus was on the northern side of the campus, the institute, which is adjacent to the main road, one of the main roads, which is the ITI road. And on the southern part of the site, we had 3 clusters for the housing, for the student housing, one which was for the girls and 2 for the boys at this point. And the dining for the entire housing was located in this area, along with the visiting faculty on the upper levels. So there were 25 living courtyards which were distributed within the student housing. And the whole approach was to actually avoid the hermetic dormitory organizational structure, which fosters a regimented form of social control that restricts learning and living. So the attempt is to create organizational variation, change, and flexibility by integrating program with non-programmatic spaces, which foster both the collective and the individual. Spaces such as streets, courtyards, bridges, verandas, and terraces with student living are integrated, creating a variety of chance interactions between the community. In terms of an environmental approach, it has its genesis from traditional tropical responses to climate and contemporary living relationships. To enable cross ventilation and protection from the harsh sun, the lower floors have been rendered porous. Winds are channeled through courtyards as they funnel the air naturally. The stills are used as common activity spaces during the hot afternoons, and the top section has decks and terraces which are used in the evening once the temperatures decrease. So we have created combinations of the typical single loaded, double loaded, and the corridor around a courtyard housing to form a hybrid typology for the student housing. So what you see in this animation is the carving of the blocks around these living courtyards, which extend both horizontally and vertically. So here you have the stilt areas which have been laid out, which are interconnected with the stairs on the upper levels to form the decks and circulation corridors, which again on the upper levels become the terraces, which are at different levels to allow for interaction between the students. So there are basically these three type of units which are repeated. The module A has stilt areas, decks, and terraces with single and double rooms, whereas the module B has a stilt area with a toilet and the single and double rooms, whereas the module C has a stair with a stilt, deck, terrace with single and double rooms. So these three modules with a mix of programs and non-programs have been designed and which have been combined in varied configurations around the living courtyards. So each cluster has to have one of these, but it can also have multiple based on where it's located. And these common spaces start then getting interconnected with each other. So what you see on the upper levels, on the lowest level are, it's a fairly porous sort of a level which has many stilted areas. The first and the second floor are much more denser with many rooms, but also have certain decks around the courtyards. And the third floor again becomes more porous with the terraces situated. So what you start seeing in the sections are also these sort of varying sections cut across the housing. These are the kind of views which you start seeing within the courtyards. None of the elevations are constant. There's a lot of connectivity between the inside and the outside. And they also have a lot of shaded spaces, and pedestrians can move and students can move through these courtyards seamlessly. There are terraces which overlook the courtyards, and these flow seamlessly to facilitate interactivity. There's a whole labyrinth of interconnected voids which starts getting formed. And the porous screens which I spoke about also create patterns of light and shadow on the periphery. Once we go to the upper levels, there are terraces and corridors and stairs around those courtyards. They are visually connected decks with interspersed voids that bring in light. On the uppermost levels, there are the terraces which again start overlooking other terraces and open spaces and the sky. There is a greater level of interconnectivity because of the form actually getting lesser. There are voids which one starts. So the whole idea of being connected with other students is through these voids at the upper levels. And how you frame the sky, which forms changing sort of based on what time of the day and the year, it creates variations. So the exterior form has been made porous with screens which allow for filtering of both light and wind. This is the building within the context. And Shantanu will be talking about the institute from here on.
So the intent here was to create social spaces that are embedded within the cultural context, along with an environmental sensitive response to create built environment which enables learning, living as a community. So actually, when we did this competition, this is also a national competition that we won, we were looking for clues. And this is one of those photographs that gave us that clue, that you see students doing Rangoli. Rangoli is a very cultural thing that students do. It's kind of creating an artwork pattern. The Indian students would know about it on the floor during festivities. And you see here, the students are not wearing a cap, but they're using an umbrella. It's not raining, but they're using an umbrella. And that gave us clues that if you wear a cap, you will sweat, but the umbrella actually gives you comfort. So that gave us a clue. So when we actually started designing the institute building, that's the program there on the right-hand side. You see this evolution of form. So it's a 50 by 100 meter block, and we realized it would go 5 stories high, and we would put a kind of an umbrella on top, like a parasol, like a brise soleil. But then on the third diagram, we realized that why can't we just split the form itself, or the section, create a void in between, and the program becomes a parasol. And then we started subtracting for porosity, allowed the winds to go through, added structure to it, textures to it, and that's how the form evolved. The next, we also worked out shadow patterns initially to see how this void would actually work, in which times of the day, which program could be placed in which area in this void. Next. So this is actually the climate strategy. So if you see, predominantly you see the parasol on top where the studios are placed, and the roof of this parasol is actually being folded so that you can create north lights. All the studios get north lights actually here. And the lower part of it is like a concourse area where all the winds can move through from the south to the north. And you can also see on the right-hand side, there is an embedded space where there is a green amphitheater roof. The auditorium sits below it. It's completely air-conditioned space, so it's embedded in the ground, and the library in the center. So we also have many strategies, like the south side is completely shielded with a concrete wall, and we have solar PV on roof. So there's technology, there is design, it all comes together. So even cotton steel louvers where there is glass in the mid sections of the building, because that was a more kind of open plan area for the faculty offices. So this is the strategy generally, climatically. And taking it further, if you look here, the use of the day, so the studios would be performed in the morning hours, and you would be using the parasol on top. As it's midday, you would come down for your lunch and then go to the workshops. So the workshops are actually shaded, and it's much cooler, but the box on top gets hot. So you're now in a shaded area, so you still have comfort. And if you look at the architectural element of a roof, a plinth, a pavilion in the center, and also formal configurations of flotation, an urban scape in the center, and embeddedness where the auditorium happens. Next, please. So in plan, the strategies were at the lower levels, a center and periphery arrangement for effective interactive learning. In the center, it's a concourse level, which it's like a field for informal network exchange. And this is what we talk about social sustainability, where this exchange is required and it's not actually planned, but it happens. And at the top levels, it's more like an efficient, focused learning area for the studios and the lecture rooms. These 3 main sections of the building. On the right-hand side, you see the program stack. On the lower levels, you have a large footprint areas of building where there's high footfall. So the auditorium, the library, the exhibition area, and around that is the next level is the administration. And the next 2 levels you see is the staff blocks. And the last 2 levels, which again, the footprint increases on top, is the studio and the lecture rooms. On the left-hand side, you see circulation, horizontal and vertical. This building has 13 different types of staircases. The idea being that every time you go up, even in plan, the circulation always keeps shifting. And when you go in the vertical dimension, you always have a different view of the building and the spaces above. So there's only 2 staircases that repeat themselves, and the other, the fire escape staircase within the cores. And with the idea that, next please. So we've tucked these 2 cores in the center and with the lifts. So the lower floor, the ground floor on the left-hand top bottom, you can see the large footprint spaces of the auditorium where visitors would come. The library in the center, also visitors would come to the libraries, and the exhibition space around which the workshops are strung along. On the first floor below, you see a more loose concourse level. In the center of it is where the general body meetings of students happen. Left-hand side is the canteen, and the right-hand side is the admin. Next, please. The next level on top, the second floor, has the staff areas, open plans there. and the top areas is the large footprint studios. Next, please. So this is the section of the building. Actually, you can see how this building actually bridges across in section. It floats and bridges across. So it's more like a gateway to the campus in that sense. And we are also trying to create these multiple grounds. So we're trying to create smaller courtyards within a larger building. So it's a deep plan building. We have to do that. Next, please. So this is just, will give you an idea. It's a simulation of how these spaces emerge. So from the ground, you're peeling off the landscape and coming, the auditorium comes into the central section of the building now, and you can enter from here. So the landscape coming up and the building bridges across from the top. You have that crit space in the center. You have the general body meeting space in the center. So that becomes the center stage for students, and the cores again. And coming to the eastern side, you will see a double helix staircase now coming across, different types of staircases, routes to go up, and coming to the eastern garden. So the entire section is actually, in that sense, very varied in that sense. Next, please. So this is an image from the western side. So you can see these deep sort of overhangs, the whole structure overhangs, and it's overlooking the games area. So these balconies that overlook with a raked stadium seating. There's an amphitheater here over the auditorium. We spoke about the auditorium. Actually, it's an embedded space because it doesn't need light or ventilation, but it has, it is restricted by, in the sense you have earth over it. This is the eastern side. So you see the eastern gardens over here, local use materials that we use. So Tandur stone is one of the materials that is very local to this area. So we went down to Tandur, we took the engineers there. Generally, when we build with the government now, they're very, very inclined to go with industrial materials, but we are very clear we wanted to work with local materials, and we could manage that. So this is the central space, what we call the general body area, the concourse level. So the students can actually have their meetings here. So it's more like a democratic space where they can express themselves, have their meetings here. And above that, you see this crit space, which actually floats above. So one of the things we realized in our architecture school is that, we have studios, but we never have a space for criticism, or what we call the crit. And that space needed to be very important, and we made it like a center stage floating in that space. So that's a very important space. On the right-hand side, you have the Cortland steel with the faculty, planning faculty on the right, architecture on the left, connected by a bridge and coming to the crit space. So the crit space is actually coming together of students from the top, faculty from the right and the left. Again, like I spoke about. So we have this theory that if you actually tuck away your elevators and express your staircases, students or anybody would always take the staircase, because that's always an interesting journey. You want to quickly get onto your movement, right? So that's what we've done here. Always express your, and this is that double helix staircase that we used here, and the views to the town itself. And multiple grounds, it creates this phenomenal sort of transparency across the building and communication with students. So when you stack a building up, there is always this connectivity with different areas, departments through the building. So you're literally seeing across 5 floors in this building. So this is that double helix staircase that we spoke about. So what it does is actually increases capacity. So on a same plan, you have 2 staircases. So it increases capacity, it doubles the capacity, and each of these staircases actually goes to the same level. So it's a very interesting way of scaling down the staircase if you want to increase capacity, because otherwise you would have a 5-meter wide stair, which is not the right scale for a human being to travel on. With putting your railings in there, it doesn't give you that comfort. And this is an interesting way of doing the same thing. So more staircases, more connections. This is that crit space on the right-hand side. So you have this kind of transparency across the studios coming down to the crit space and the faculty floors below. And these corridors then, next please. So what we realized is actually with the architecture school, with the studios, is why don't we create a learning corridor? So we created for criticism, the crit space, but also the informal criticisms. We created this learning corridors, which was as wide as the studios, where people could use it for pin-ups. So it's 100 meter by 50 meters wide corridor for, 100 meter by 10 meter corridor for these activities. Next, please. That's what it would look like. That's what, that's how you bring in light from the top. So this space has continuous skylights to have good lighting in the space. That's when some of these voids come across. And within the studios, the north lights working and bringing in light into the, so these students actually interact. So the students are not silos in that sense. They're interconnected, even in plan and even in section, they're interconnected. So they're never silos. So learning is kind of, there is a cross learning across. Next, please. And the materiality, just three stark materials of concrete with the sky, the cotton steel in the center, mid sections of the building, and the tandoor stone of the ground emerging out of stone. That's again some framing of the sky looking down. And moving away on the western side now. Next, please. And away on the northern side, you can see the amphitheater or the auditorium and moving out of the building. So these are some of the spaces being used, how students use their spaces, and some of them being sketched by their people who occupy them. So it's very interesting when you have an architecture school, people also sketch those spaces being used, which is really interesting for us. And one more sketch on this side of the amphitheater. And that completes that project. And this is a project, it's a very interesting project, adaptive reuse, I would call it. It's a school, a primary and a secondary school in Mumbai, near the sea, near Marine Drive. So it's actually a residential building, and a school started slowly by housing a school in an apartment. And slowly they grew, and over time they actually started buying or taking up apartments. And now they've kind of completely taken over this whole residential building. So it's actually housing a school in a residential building. And the interesting part of the school is the clients are, it's one of the only schools that is actually, it's a parent-run cooperative school. So they have 11 or 12 different committees that actually run the school. So very interesting program, very small school. It's a heritage building. Next, please. So what we started doing is when they called us in, we realized that the programs were distributed all over the building and needed to be looked at comprehensively. The first thing we looked at is how do you look at open space, because Mumbai doesn't have much of space. So the margins outside the building and the margins or the courtyards inside, these rescued spaces were looked at for interaction and use. Next, please. And also making the right connections to the program. For instance, they had their kitchen on the ground floor, but they had their dining area on the topmost floor because it is the largest span area. So we said this kind of synergy. So you would, if you know the Indian cooking, you would be seeing people carrying dal across 4 floors. They don't have an elevator. They carried dal across the building, and that could be dangerous. So we were actually reworking this whole program out and master planning it actually to really make sense out of this. Next, please. It being a heritage structure, load-bearing walls, concrete, the first thing we realized is the entire building is actually had been masked with, the ceiling had been masked, the flooring had been vinyl flooring over existing flooring, verandas had been taken over to use spaces. And the first thing we said is we should let these spaces breathe apart from the master plan. So on the right-hand side, you can see there's a kitchen at number 6, and 5, 4, and 3 were made into the dining areas. These also actually, when the dining areas were not used for lunch, they would be used by parents who would come and organize themselves with different committees. So these spaces were really used well, and the verandas outside them were also very interestingly used. So the kids, the pre-primary school was organized on the left-hand side because they needed ground to run around. So the kids are at the lower level, they don't need to climb stairs. And as we speak, on the right-hand side, you can see the laboratories are there. On the left-hand side, this was an apartment, but in the second phase, we've already they bought it over. So this is a slow process, right? They keep buying apartments and calling us again and said, so the left-hand side now has become an office area already. So it's a constant change because and this is the central area where a lot of common spaces like the library, the computer room, and the art and maker rooms are strung along. Next, please. And this is the 3rd floor. On the left-hand side, you can see there's one apartment still pending. They need to acquire that. And this is the topmost floor where the largest span spaces are possible. So the history geography is also here. Next, please. So the margins, like we spoke about, how we're going to use them. So these are the verandas and how they now suddenly start to breathe, and you can connect with students using these verandas in a better way. And the spaces for dining we spoke about. So you can start seeing these jack arches being expressed finally, and the flooring, which we removed all those vinyls from them. And these are very old tiles. Next, please. Next, please. And the pre-primary school. So we started looking at a classroom environment as an immersive environment where you can perform. Next, please. So this is the way these students use this drama space. Next, please. And the other pre-primary space as a library. Next, please. And a biology space. They even have a name for that skeleton. Next, please. This is the art space. The library. And a more sort of reading area where you could assemble the reading area for yourself with furniture. So makes it interesting and interactive. Subject room. So we are not looking at classrooms, we're looking at subject rooms. This is the geography space, which interacts with the history space. Next, please. Next, please. So you and the larger span spaces can also sort of connect with each other. So if you want to have a larger classroom. Next, please. The staff area, so we could cover light in the roof. Next, please. And one more multi-purpose space for seminar room. Next, please. So we had about 13 or 14 different types of floorings in this building because there are different apartments. So we had to come up with one kind of flooring to unify it. So apart from the existing, we also worked out a pattern. So this is the pattern we worked out. From what was existing, we created a pattern from, you can see, to something that is very dense to something that is very light in that sense, and how it comes together with the space. So the central area is the dense part and going towards the light, so the light filters in. So you have reflective light from the more lighter areas. Next, please. Yeah, so these are some of the details of the floors, the walls, and the ceiling. So expressing the ceiling was the idea. Expressing the floor was the idea. The next project is actually also adaptive reviews. So Mumbai's textile landscape, the mills have transformed rapidly. This is an office where TBWA is an advertising agency, and they wanted an office in this space. And what we realized is advertising, next please, is in Mumbai. Advertising, the way they work actually is what Frank Duffy calls the den type of working, which is more interactive. They collaborate a lot and work a lot. So first thing we wanted to identify is where are these collaborative spaces and where would they come up? So the meeting spaces, the spaces that are not meeting spaces, but also collaborations could happen. So we came up with a pattern that once we align these interactive spaces, which are clearly marked here, portrayed here, and then the rest of the spaces were aligned with the north light spaces, which with the favorable light that we wanted to achieve for the open plan area. Next, please. So here you can see that some of the meeting spaces are up in the mezzanine areas. Next, please. And we were using colors that they're corporate sort of colors. So this is an area where there's a billiard table. There's a lot of that happens there. We created an area where they could announce their wins, an amphitheater so that they could have discussions around their office. That's the amphitheater. That's the bridge. Town hall. And also in terms of meeting spaces, most of the times being vacant, they can also become a part of the reception area, or they can connect with each other to become larger meeting spaces. So meeting spaces sometimes need that flexibility. So we're using these industrial materials of metal and a concrete, raw concrete floor with the ceiling. And this is another space that we transformed, which is in a suburb called Bandra for a restaurant and a bar. So we've done many spaces for this client, and he came and said that I have a very small budget this time around. And so what we looked at is the context, and we said, how can we transform this with a small budget? Next, please. So really looking into what the user is, what do they consume? And Mumbai being hot and humid, I think this is one thing. We see a lot of consumption of beer. So that was behind the back of our mind. Next, please. So the whole idea, if you have to bring down a budget, what would we do? Next, please. So this is the building on which these terraces had to be occupied by us. Next, please. So we added a layer of green around, and then we allowed this. So the flooring to flow out. So with respect to flooring, also what we did is we identified a flooring, a cement tile supplier, and asked him for what did he have in surplus. And he gave us a few of these tiles that he said that I have a lot of these in surplus. It didn't. And we tried to create a pattern around it. So it was reused. We had to manufacture a few more of those. But it was literally reusing a pattern that actually came out of a salvage. Next, please. The bar extending onto one side, the restaurant on the other. That's the wall that we created, like a digital wall that the client wanted. Next, please. Trellises, it rains a lot, so these terraces needed covering only in the monsoon. Otherwise, they would just be trellises. So it's like a pavilion that opens out with these terraces on as a bar on one side and the restaurant on the other side, with this wall that you see there, which is a digital wall. But actually that digital wall, next please, these are the terraces. Digital wall is actually created out of beer bottles. So beer bottles are sold as salvage as 2 rupees a bottle, I think. And we said, why don't we reuse them? So this is the first week when the bottles were going into the wall, and creates this amazing experience of a backdrop for a bar. So the last project we're going to show you is the installation we made at the Kochi Muziris Biennale. We were invited to do this. Kochi Muziris Biennale, most of the installations and the artworks happen within the walled areas of the Aspen Wall and many such compounded areas. And we said that we want to work outside the compounded areas, being architects, and most of them are architects, artists there. And we said that we will try and work in these areas. So we found a street that was connecting the sea to the church, and we said we'll work here. Next, please. So the idea of transforming the space was more about making it into an event street. So it was a dead street in that sense. So the sea on the left-hand side, I would say, on the right is the church. And this needed to be connected. And next, please. Next. So we came up with an idea of an installation that could be erected very quickly, and it would make an impact. And it had to be built very fast. So we were involved in the build process ourselves. And it had to be easy to build. So that was, and it had to be built with transient materials, so that when the Biennale is over, these materials can go another place and reuse. So we use bamboo in that sense, which is a very, very easy material to build with. Next, please. And we created programs on the right-hand side of more of exhibition, and towards the sea more of an event or a performance. So platforms for performance versus a space that you could move through for exhibitions. So that's the plan. On the right-hand side, you can see the sea, and on the left-hand side is the church. So when we started the build process, it was more about keeping it modular, keeping it, the details that we worked out, the joinery details were with nuts and bolts, so that it could be unscrewed quickly and taken away and sent to another site and reused. So the sponsors also were very happy that we could reuse and salvage these materials for another place after the Biennale was over. Next, please. So this is before and after, in the beginning, when these were parking lots, and then it started transforming when we came in. Next, please. And that's how the spaces started to get used. So this thoroughfare now became quite active, with people visiting it for exhibitions. And in the evening, there were performances along the sea. Next, please. And that's what it is. That's the project.